party people, this is Captain Kim speaking. Welcome aboard Benga Airways. After takeoff, we'll pump up the sound system, cause we're going to eat pizza.
No, you're not watching a bowling screen after getting a strike. What you are witnessing is a typical product of the 90s Europe music scene. A scene that has been dead for a long time due to how outdated, annoying, and according to a lot of people, creatively bankrupt it was. I'm of course talking about Europop/Eurodance.
Hey, yo, Captain Jack. Hey, yo, Captain Jack. Bring me back to the railroad track. Bring me back to the railroad track. Give me a gun in my hand. Give me a gun in my hand. I wanna be a shooting man.
I just fucking shot myself.
I don't like Eurodance. In fact, I kinda hate it, and I find it annoyingly absurd. It features everything I tend to hate in music. Phony positivity, party time, woo!
Happy people, it's a happy day. Have a party.
And the flashing bright-ass colors that are going to give me a seizure attack on a subconscious level. There's no deeper meaning to the music, and it's just flashy fluff. Well, except for... It's 2008. I'm a little shit, wasting his time on Roblox and watching videos on this hip website called YouTube. What videos, you may ask? Roblox, of course. Specifically, I was watching videos by the guy called Flesh Gertra, who was fairly popular for his Roblox blooper videos. What does any of this have to do with a guy named John? Everything. It is because of Flesh's intro to his videos that I was introduced to
I'm a Scatman.
Now keep in mind, I'm a little shit at this point in time. My taste in music hasn't even begun to take shape, thus anything that sounded goofy, silly, catchy, or was accompanied by a CG music video was a slam dunk for me. However, unlike the memes and fads that I mentioned above, Scatman's songs stuck with me for some reason and made me want to listen to more songs by this man in a funny hat. And so my deep dive into this man's discography began, and I listened to his music without really understanding the meaning behind it, mainly because of my at the time poor English. A few years pass, I've upgraded from Roblox to Half-Life, and its various mods, and listening to metal. My tastes were forming and shaping, and yet for some reason the guy in the funny hat keeps circulating through my Winamp playlist. So I searched Scatman on YouTube, not really knowing what I'm looking for, and one of the results that pops up is a new video. A Danish short film called Cigarette that focuses on the loss and waste of youth. It's a fairly somber film, and the reason it popped up is because Scatman appears as part of the soundtrack, albeit in a more depressing form.
Vi gikk hjem, atlan veien, vi sigaretten i hånden. Jeg vil ikke spørre noen om melda vennen hjem. Jeg vil til hjem at tendre henne. Sjølv.
A far cry from the upbeat nature of the original. And so now, armed with the knowledge that a place like Wikipedia exists, I would once again begin my deep dive into the man's life story, and what I would read would affect me greatly.
I'm the Scatman. Do you know why I'm Scatman? Because I'm a scat singer. Do you know what scatting is? Scatting is an attempt to take a jazz solo or a music solo, just plain solo, with the human voice. For example, Scooby-Dooby-Dooby, Scooby-Dooby-Wah-Wah, Ooby-Dee-Daddy-You-Do-Do-Dee-Boop, Ibadom-Do-Do-You-Da-Dum-Dee-Dee-Do-Do, Scat singing. What do you think of that, huh?
Alright, we're going to slightly fast forward through this section. John's biography and history has already been covered by various YouTubers like Todd in the Shadows and Nezumi VA. If you're interested in the man's story, go check those videos out. However, the important bits that you need to know about John is that he suffered from a severe case of stuttering since a very young age, which led to him being bullied, developing insecurities and anxieties.
In about the 6th grade, where I was to stand up in front of a classroom and try to recite a current event that was going on at that time. But I got up in the classroom, broke out tears, and cried and went back to my seat. I could not get the first word out.
His only saving grace was the music in his household.
The other side of the coin is that I had a very musical household. My mother sang, my brother sang, we had a piano, and we always heard Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald. When I was a knee,
which eventually led him to grabbing a seat behind the piano and trying to follow along with the greats.
I remember asking my mom for years. She says, "Mommy, get me a piano. Get me a piano, please." Finally, about the age of 12, she purchased one, and I sat down and I played, and I figured out the harmonies and all of that.
Thus starting his musical career. Which finally brings us to the main topic of this video, the man's first ever released album titled simply as John Paul Larkin. See, in the videos I mentioned previously, everybody does a great job of covering the man's rise to fame and the wholesome meaning behind his music, which was all about teaching kids, and any listeners really, to overcome their weaknesses, just like he did with stuttering, or rather his insecurities and anxieties.
I'm up here stuttering, and I ask all of the young kids, if you have a problem that you think is holding you back, you can tap into that problem and it can become a source of strength and a source of power.
But nobody seems to cover the actual struggle that came before said fame. Nobody covers the man's drug and alcohol addiction during his musical pursuits.
You know, I've been struggling all my life. I hid out, I used alcohol, I used other things to try to stop the pain in my early age. I put that out to the kids when I'm talking to them. They know that.
Nobody covers his desperation and frustration with repetitive failures to grasp said fame.
I struggled for years as a jazz artist. With or without the stuttering, it was still tough.
And for good reason, there's really not much documentation of that period of time in John's life. So how am I going to focus on that period of time? By giving you a listen and breakdown of the John Paul Larkin album, because by listening to it, you will immediately notice a massive deviation from the poppy and positive presentation in John's music that everybody's familiar with. This album, in my opinion, is one of his greatest works, not only because it gives you a glimpse into his musical roots, but you can also hear said struggles, frustrations, and anguish in the songs. Which is not surprising because during the year that this album was released, which was 1986, John presumably was still suffering from his addiction, since according to John himself,
I was a mess until 1986 when I decided to get some help and I straightened out. And I found out these things about myself, which I'm just trying to pass on.
And quick disclaimer, whilst I love and am very passionate about music, I know diddly squat about actual music theory, technique, and etc. So don't expect this album breakdown to be some kind of knowledgeable review. This is just me articulating to you why and how I love this album. So if I say something wrong, keep that in mind. Now, apparently this album's genre is considered to be avant-garde jazz. Just so you know, I know nothing about jazz, let alone its various subgenres, but even without knowing anything about jazz, I think most people will agree with me, this is a pretty hardcore way to open your first album, with a barrage of sound just bombing your ears. If that wasn't enough, a few seconds later, John jumps in and further emphasizes said bombing with his scatting. After that, the song slows down into this stalkingly creepy rhythm as John sings over the music.
Somebody asked what's the meaning of jazz, and I said we're the misfits. And all I can tell you is while you're still sleeping, the saints are still weeping, 'cause things you call dead haven't yet had the chance to be born.
Lyrics that, as many would point out, he would carry over to his hit song that he became famous for.
If Scatman can do it, so can you. I hear you all ask about the meaning of scat. Well, I'm the professor. All I can tell you, why you still sleep when the saints still weeping, because things are all dead and forget chance to be born.
Kind of eerie hearing said lyrics here presented in a more sinister light. And then the song just out of nowhere picks up the pace with the instruments going absolutely out of control. Someone in the comments of the album said it best. The Misfit is a straight up thrash metal solo being played on piano. Last Night I Dreamed is a pretty standard fare. It's this cool, slow, relaxed track that allows John to showcase his clean vocals without the scatting.
Last night I dreamed the spell had been broken. All of our joking blew up in our face.
It doesn't stand out in any particular way. In fact, it kind of pales in comparison to the insanity of the Misfit. But I think that's the point, and is exactly the reason as to why it's placed right after the Misfit. It gives the listener a chance to slow down, process what happened, catch a deep breath in preparation for the musical onslaught coming up. I decided to put those two tracks together because honestly I can't break them down in any meaningful way. Both of the tracks are entirely instrumental, and there's only so many times I can say, "Wow, this is good music." All I can say is that if this is an avant-garde jazz album, it definitely lives up to that title, because the instrumentation can switch out from a straightforward tune and take turn into a completely different sound that will throw you off. Drum solos, build-ups, just outright weird shit. The main notable difference between the two tracks, however, is Love Cry is more straightforward in its sound, while Angel's Flight is this weird, non-stop, anxiety-inducing insane ride, with the instruments seeming to do whatever the fuck they want. Except for the poor bassists whose fingers must have been falling off trying to keep the track together. It's like the instruments in the song are fighting amongst each other, specifically the sax and the piano.
I sing a song of love for you. John Coltrane.
A lot of people say that The Misfit is the best track on the album, and it is definitely a strong track, but this right here, this is something special. You remember how I said that this album's really good at relaying John's struggle earlier in the video? Yeah, this track right here epitomizes that statement. It's the shortest track on the album, but in my opinion is the most impactful. It starts out very quietly, no instruments, just John dedicating the song to John Coltrane, scatting away, hitting some crazy Mongolian throat singing level notes.
I sing a song of love for you. John Coltrane.
Then the piano comes in and begins to build up this tension with John scatting over it. His voice teetering between being melodic and just outright yelling. Then a feeling of release as the piano adopts this hopeful tune, and John's voice seems to emphasize the feeling of relief. Then we quiet down, and we're back where we started. And you think this is the end of it.
I sing a song of love for you. John Coltrane.
But then John begins to get louder.
John Coltrane.
And louder.
John Coltrane.
And louder.
Train, 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 ay, 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 John Coltrane.
The last track to wrap this album up is probably the most straightforward track on this entire thing, which is fitting. It's just 4 musicians showcasing their skills. On an album that was never going to be a success due to the music scene in the US seeing some massive debuts, drowning out the jazz genre in its entirety.
I don't think America takes care of its jazz artists as well as it could There, I said it. I love my country. I think America is young, however. I think it's a teenager compared to other countries.
Which would lead to John deciding to move to Germany and trying his hand at something completely different. The rest of the story is fairly well known. He implements his scatting with techno, ending up with a hit that made him famous. And whether you think his following work is subpar, even you have to acknowledge the man's dedication to his craft. Even when he transitioned into Europop, a genre as far away as it is from jazz, he never gave up his love for jazz, implementing it into his latest music wherever he could.
Get out the way, let blues play.
Trying to educate his new audiences on the beauty of jazz. While most Europop acts would borrow from other music genres just to get a soulless one-hit wonder with phony positivity, John always came off as a sincere elderly gentleman who has many life experiences under his belt, who didn't mind telling the world about his struggles, all in hopes of inspiring other people. And that is why I love the Larkin album. I'm a firm believer that pain is one of art's greatest motivators, and while it's nothing new in music, you have to be careful on how you do it, because sometimes it can come off as awkward and uncomfortable. But when it's done right,
Somebody gave me some seaweed, then suddenly all that I said was as heavy as lead. And it sunk in the mire that's lit by the fire that made me transpire this whole silly trip in the first place. Such a social disgrace. Crazy.
and nobody can question the man's dedication, because despite his diagnosis with lung cancer, he'd continued to tour his latest album, performing for as many people as he could until he couldn't go anymore, and would collapse on stage, passing away a few months later. As sad as the ending of John's life is, the legacy he left behind speaks for itself. While the countless amount of Europop stars faded away into the unknown obscurity, John's story continued to attract more and more people as time passed on. Currently, people have an interest in personal stories, films like Oppenheimer, The Iron Claw, and Bob Marley's One Love. It is not surprising that reportedly the rights to John's story have been acquired, and we might see the Scatman on the big screen, which if you ask me is long overdue. As for music, if the John Larkin album piqued your interest, you'll be happy to know there was another album released posthumously called Listen to the Scatman, which collects the man's jazz work only.
Well, I don't go out late and I don't care to go. I'm home about 8. Me and my radio ain't misbehaving. I'm saving my love for you. It's your kisses, they're worth waiting for. Hear me talking, baby. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't go out late, and I don't care to go. I'm home about 8. Me and my radio ain't misbehaving. I'm saving my love for you, babe. Well, ain't misbehaving. I'm saving my love just for you, babe. 'Cause you ain't never gonna catch me fooling around with no one else but you, babe. Even when I spend those long, dreary days in Europe, isolated on a fjord, no, darling, nobody's gonna enter into my life, darling. Because you know, you ain't gonna catch me messing around with no one. Absolutely no one. Because I'm saving my love. I'm saving my love for you. Oh, yeah.
PR, baby. It's all PR. Okay? Cut. Now we're gonna have some heroin and... Just kidding.